ceremony marks the 21st anniversary of the Honourable Fraternity of Ancient Freemasons. This fraternity is modelled in miniature on the same lines as the Grand Lodge of England, possessing and working the same secrets, mysteries, degrees, and rituals. And it has the further distinction of being the only Masonic fraternity to be entirely organized by women for women.
It is a rather intriguing scene. Such little girls and such grand and important-looking men. It took place in 1802. The Prince of Wales and other distinguished Freemasons are watching pupils from the first Masonic school entering Grand Lodge in London. Leading them is the Chevalier Bartholomew Ruspini, a man of strong charitable principles and the founder of the school. It was opened in 1788. The year, incidentally, in which another Freemason, Mozart, composed his last 3 symphonies. Ruspini's school began with 15 little girls, and they were instructed in reading, writing, arithmetic, and needlework. The spirit of care and concern that produced the first school has survived unimpaired to the present day. The care and concern haven't altered. Only the numbers and the breadth of the curriculum have grown.
Enough! He's spoiling the fun with his incessant caterwauling. Let the entertainment begin. Kill! Kill! Faithful! Kill! Man! Kill! Faithful! Kill! Kill!
We've come a long way since the school of 1788 with those 15 little girls. Today, the Royal Masonic School for Girls proudly takes its place as one of the world's outstanding girls' schools.
Being at an all-girls school is fun, I would describe it. It's a good learning environment that you can achieve because all the girls get on so well. It's always like a little family, which obviously helps the dynamic of the class flow really well, meaning that we learn a lot and we can achieve a lot.
The important thing for us in the senior school is that we offer a truly personalised curriculum. So the girls who are the most academic, who are very keen to move on to the Oxbridge, the medicine courses in later life, have the opportunity to follow that highly academic route as they go through the school. But equally, we cater for the student who perhaps has different interests.
Then anybody who knows anything about mind control, MK Ultra, and alternative research can quickly look into the Rainbow Girls, which is an association, basically a splinter off Job's Daughters, but is definitely a major component of Job's Daughters. And those who don't know, Job's Daughters is basically based off the book of Job, of the Old Testament of the Bible. And it's a Freemasonic organization. And Job's Daughters and the Rainbow Girls, this is like classic mind control programming stuff where people wear certain colors and are addressed by the color, like, hey, blue, hey, red, and all this stuff. And the fact that there's Masons, like the neighborhood I live at, there's a Freemason in the neighborhood. And the fact that there's Freemasons who would use underage children to wear certain colors and to participate in street theater with sexual connotation. Like, that's what do you think they're doing in these lodges? What do you think they're doing behind the doors with the Rainbow Girls.
I'm Grandmaster Levesque, Grandmaster of the Masons in Michigan, and I wanted to take a few minutes out of my time to introduce you to a couple of special friends that I brought with me today. We're here at the Amway Grand Plaza in Grand Rapids, and we're celebrating the annual session of Job's Daughters International, and we're here in the Ambassador Ballroom. I have with me today Angie Greer and Sydney Hovius. And you're going to learn a little bit more about them as we go on. And first, let's take a moment and find out a little bit more about Angie. Angie is going to become the Grand Bethel Honored Queen of Job's Daughters. Angie, thanks for being out here today.
Thanks for having me.
This thing called Job's Daughters, the Masons in Michigan are curious about it because they've never been to a meeting of Job's Daughters. Tell me, what's a Job's Daughter?
A Job's daughter is a girl between the age of 10 and 20.
Okay. Is that it? Does she have any Masonic affiliation?
Yes, she has to be related to a Master Mason to be in Job's Daughters.
What's your Masonic affiliation?
My father is my Masonic affiliation.
Tell us about your dad a little bit. Where is he a Mason?
He's not so active in Masons now because he's more active in Job's Daughters, but he was a Mason of Welfare Masonic Lodge.
590.
590, yeah, sure.
Where is that?
It's in Genesee County, but we live in Flint, so it's like 5 minutes away from our house. So, yeah.
And that's how you learned about Job's Daughters, from your father?
Yes, my grandfather was a Mason also, but I did learn it from my father because I'd never knew my grandfather.
Great.
Excellent. So tell us a little bit about Job's. How come we're here this weekend? What's going on?
Well, this is our grand session, and it's an annual meeting place. We obviously meet here once a year, annual meeting place, okay? Well, basically, the real purpose of this grand session is to elect the new Grand Bethel Junior Princess, which is a state officer who will be moving up the line to eventually be what I'm going to be starting tomorrow, Grand Bethel Honor Queen.
Oh, so wait, you were elected to this Grand Bethel Junior Princess. How long have you been doing this?
It's a 3-year line, so
3 years.
2 years ago I was elected.
So do you get to travel any?
Yes. I actually went to Canada, which is the farthest I've gone with Job's, but yeah, for an Amaranth meeting with the Job's. They were doing the Lighted Cross there.
So, like, you have local groups of Job's Daughters. What are they called?
Bethels.
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 Cool. I want to come and visit a Job's Daughters Bethel, and as a Mason, I've never been, so what do I have to do?
What do you mean? What do you have to do?
Do I have to do anything special to show up to a meeting?
Well, if you've never attended a meeting before, you have to assume a pledge of honor. Just keeping not our secrets, but making sure that all of our work will be kept under wraps, I guess.
So, I have a question for you.
I have an answer.
I see rainbows in the sky all the time. How do you relate to the Rainbow Girls of Michigan? I don't know what it means to be a rainbow. Can you tell me?
Well, we mostly get rainbow because in the Bible there's a verse that the rainbow is the ancient promise of God to his people that he will never again destroy the world by flood. So if you look at our stations, we have faith, hope, and charity. But the greatest of these is charity. So we're that promise.
Hi friends, Shani here. I wanted to make another video today of another interesting King James Version Bible that I found recently. I have a really awesome used bookstore up here where I'm at, and I come across some interesting things I made on the Masonic and the Order of the Eastern Star, the Baphomet there. Y'all can say whatever you want, it's a Baphomet. And then I found this one, which is for the Rainbow Order for girls, for teenage girls. And there's just some weird stuff in here, and I wanted to share it with you. So here you see, let me first open it up. It says the pathway of initiation, and it has a verse, and it says, "What is a rainbow? The quest of girlhood on the journey of life, a hidden gate between reality and enchantment, an ideal made by real enchantment. It's like straight out of the New Age Handbook. Isn't that crazy? I just find that crazy. Some other reading, Why Rainbow, History and Purpose of Rainbow. The Order of the Rainbow for Girls is an international organization for girls of Masonic and Eastern Star homes and their girlfriends. Different promises here that have different scriptures. The youth movement, ritual. Even though I know that this is a Masonic Bible for young girls, and I'm trying to read my notes here, and how man puts his words and his rituals and his opinions and his feelings before God's words. That really is what these Masonic Bibles show to me, is man's words before God's words. And I don't know if any of you knew that these even existed, and I didn't until I found them. So, just kind of crazy. Man. Okay, ritual. As the ritual of the order is grouped around the color stations, the following passages are suggested as additional references for ritualistic study. And again, if you want to read it, just pause. Crazy.
I go to high school, love music, and enjoy hanging out with friends. I guess I'm a typical high school girl. But then I started thinking about my future. To be successful, you have to be prepared for life. And now I am. I'm a rainbow girl. The International Order of the Rainbow for Girls is a nonprofit organization where girls learn leadership skills, public speaking skills, how to dress for success, and how to give back to their communities while having fun bonding. Girls between the ages of 11 and 20 can learn common skills that are needed to succeed. There are many workshops and opportunities teaching successful leadership, especially in community service. Here, girls can learn how to work together through teamwork while supporting many charities like Relay for Life, Special Olympics, and our current state charity, David's House. We also teach girls how to walk and talk with an appearance that will help you to be successful, especially when you are public speaking or running an event with us. Rainbow girls know how to work hard while having fun doing skits, games, and mostly bonding with your fellow sisters from your local town to all over the world. Networking is a key tool for success, and it is clearly taught in our organization through sisterhood.
The open Bible. Each rainbow girl should open her Bible at the 9th chapter of Genesis every night before she retires and leave it lying open in her room all night as a symbol of the thought that she is asking, that its white light shall penetrate her heart, and that God shall watch over her while she sleeps. She should close the Bible as soon as she rises. Genesis 9 is Noah, and for when God tells Noah to replenish the earth. You can see. You can read all that if you'd like. Just kind of crazy, right? Oh, the church life. Members of the Order of the Rainbow for Girls are taught to identify themselves with some church. Some church. Here's some here. So another thing I found interesting is of all of these Holman Bibles, they even came with a little box. They were all printed in the 40s. And I've, looked around, and again, if anybody has any of these or has seen any of these Masonic Bibles from more recent times, again, these that I have and all the ones I have seen are from the 40s.
So,
let's go into a little bit of history about the Eastern Star, or the Order of Eastern Star, the OES, or as they like to be called, the Star. Okay, it's a Masonic organization that's really a sister organization of the Freemasons, or as I like to call it, the Ladies Auxiliary of the Masonry.
The sisterhood.
The sisterhood. It boasts that it's the largest organization, largest secret organization in the world, and in which both men and women are eligible. The majority of the members are females. Now, in Dr. Rob Morris, who's very well known and active, he's an active Mason, is credited with founding the Eastern Star around 1868, somewhere in there. But the origin of the order is also said to be shrouded in mystery, just like the origins of their brothers, the Masons. Some historians for the order state that the Eastern Star founding does predate Morris's, going back as far as 1730 in France, having roots in the French. And this is what I thought was very interesting. It has roots in the androgynous Masonry, also known as the adoptive rite. What happened was back then, these guys used to dress up like women.
Great.
Yeah, guys used to dress up like women, and parade around and do their little, whatever they did. But anyways, Morris did admit in 1852 that he borrowed the structure of the organization from the French, who introduced the androgynous degrees to America when they came out to help. They helped to fight against Great Britain during the American Revolutionary War. And but the OES does have the Masonic ties. We're going to go into, and we're going to show you that. And it's what's bad is thousands and thousands of decent women have innocently taken part in these pagan rites that are put forth in this organization, and it's basically witchcraft. Basically witchcraft. And we're going to show you how. We're going to show you what we're talking about, and we're going to show you the OES's, or the Order of the Eastern Star's Masonic ties. So as you can see, it's the 5-pointed star of the Eastern Star, the 5-pointed star. And if you look, and that's onto the left, and you see the red, the blue, the yellow, the white, and the green. Okay. Those colors are going to come into play. We're going to explain to you what those colors are, what they mean in witchcraft. The 5-pointed star, that's the pentagram. All right. So for the Eastern Star members who may still be unconvinced about the paganism in their organization, we're going to take a look at Rob Morris. He's a founder of the Eastern Star, boasted about his origins. This is what he wrote. These are in his own words. About the 1st of February, 1850, I was laid up for 2 weeks with a sharp attack of rheumatism, and it was this period which I gave to the work in hand. By the aid of my papers and the memory of Mrs. Morris, I recall even the trivial occurrences connected with the work, how I hesitated for a time, now I dallied over the name, how I wrote face to face with the clock that I might keep my drama within due limits of time, etc. The name was first settled upon the Eastern Star. Next, the number of points, 5, to correspond with the emblem of the master's carpet. This is the pentagon, the signet of King Solomon, and eminently properly to adoptive Masonry. The colors, the emblems, the floral wreaths, the esoteric property to these 5 heroines were easy of invention. They seemed to fall ready-made into my hands. The only place of mechanism difficult to fit in to the construction was the Kabbalistic motto, but that occurred to me in ample time for use. So the selections were Jephthah's daughter, in illustrating respect to the binding force of a vow. Ruth, in illustrating devotion to religious principles. Esther, as illustrating fidelity to kindred and friends. Martha, as illustrating undeviating faith in the hour of trial. Electra, as illustrating patience and submission under wrong. These are all Masonic virtues, and they have nowhere in history been more brilliant than we exemplify them in the 5 characteristics presented in the lectures of the Eastern Star. Well, doesn't that sound so pious and religious? Morris continues. It is a fitting comment upon these statements that in all the charges that the Eastern Star has experienced that so many hands for 34 years, no changes in the name, histories, or essential lessons have been proposed. Well, that's not true, because in 1855, Henry Wilson Coils, which is 33rd degree Mason, revised the names. They were changed. So Lori Cabot, she was a witch. She was a Eastern Star, and she says, death to Hecate was said to meet the departed souls and lead them to the underworld. And so Hecate became known as the Queen of the Witches. This brings to mind that the star used in the Eastern Star represents Hermes, who also was the conductor of the dead to the underworld. Hecate was the name in which Diana was known in the infernal regions in heaven. Her name was Luna. It is no wonder that Hecate is called the Queen of the Witches, since she taught sorcery and witchcraft. But why would this be the one of the goddesses chosen for the Eastern Star under the name of Luna? Could it be that the person who selected these names was well versed in mythology and witchcraft? Diana's symbol, by the way, is the crescent, and the star, which is the fertility symbol and the symbol of witchcraft. The goddess represented Ada, Jephthah's daughter. Remember that Ada was a young girl who committed to perpetual virginity in order to fulfill the vow her father had spoken of. And it is in the Bible. It's in Judges 11, 37 through 40. Notice that Diana's most favorite temple is the Ephesus. Ephesus and elsewhere, the cult of Diana encouraged sexual license and sacred promiscuity. The idolatrous statue of Diana depicted with multiple breasts signifying her sensual nature. So in fact, the great Diana of Ephesians, is Diana, or the goddess Hecate, Selena, or Artemis, the moon goddess. And so that is where that Jephthah became her. Esther was Hebe. The goddess usually mentioned in the Eastern Star for Hester is Hebe, H-E-B-E. We are told this is in Greek mythology. The goddess of youth, the daughter of Zeus and Hera, Hebe was for a time the cupbearer of the gods, distributing nectar and ambrosia at all their feasts. But she was later replaced in this office by the young Trojan prince Diadme, on Mount Olympus, the home of the gods. She was in charge of domestic matters. So we have now this changed to another pagan goddess. Ruth was changed to Flora. Flora was the goddess who had represented Ruth. Flora, also known as Chloris, C-H-L-O-R-I-S, was a goddess of springtime and flowers in Roman mythology. This is one of the goddesses of whom Albert Pike wrote about in his poem. The Romans held an annual festival in honor of Flora. They call it Floralia, which was celebrated with merriment and drunkenness. Now, the Electra's symbol, which was a lion, and we know that the lion is supposed to represent Christ, but we know that there's no way that this lion does represent Christ, because it is also, goes with the symbol of Ishtar, Isis, goddess of love. Yep. Osiris was the pagan god who committed incest with his sister Isis, which resulted in the birth of Horus. Could there be a correlation between the symbol of the goddess of love, the lion, and Electra's symbol, also the lion, in her past, which is love one another? Instantly, the lion was the emblem of the sun. The sun with the rays was also embedded on it. So he goes on to say, shortly after this conversation, I received a letter from another former witch. He wrote that Arame was an obscure Egyptian goddess, and at least my suspicion that Arame was a goddess was finally confirmed. If Arame was a secret name known only to initiates, obviously there would be very little or no information about her available. And you see the red, the blue, the yellow, the white, and the green. Okay? Those colors are going to come into play. We're going to explain to you what those colors are. guys. Eastern Star is a secret organization. You are not going to get anything from a person who really belongs to the Eastern Star. They're going to tell you lies. They're going to tell you deceptions. They're going to cover up what they know because they are sworn to secrecy.
And all the actors were high Masons. If you take those early actors, Frank Sinatra, all of those that were involved in those movies, John Wayne, they were all 33-degree Freemasons. And if you follow it down through the line to this very day, most of the actors, I would say the great majority, if not all, of the major actors are all high Masons. All the singers, all of them.
Kim bunlar? Gerçek ışığı arayan adam. Az önce okunan anda şimdi beni birlikte tekrar etmek. Evrenin bu mimarı simgesiyle burada bulunan mason topluluğu önünde kendi istek ve boynuzlukla içtenlikle dolu olarak söz veriyorum.
Hey folks, this is KJ from the Scariest Movie Ever channel on YouTube. And I have a video here that to me is very important, and it covers a subject I've covered in other videos as well, and that's the deception of Freemasonry, what Freemasonry really is. Now, I get attacked consistently on my videos about Freemasons from people that say they're Freemasons. I wanted to make this video and just show you this, and that way we can just end the discussion. Because this book right here did it for me. It's called The Deadly Deception. Somebody suggested this to me like 3 years ago. It was a friend of mine. It's from Jim Shaw, and this guy was an actual 33rd degree Mason. He made it all the way through. I'm just reading a few of the pages, and I'm going to let you see from his own words what happened, kind of the way that he first realized he was about to become the 33rd, and then all the way kind of through the process and what happened. So there's just a few things you need to know going into this, is that throughout this whole thing he was never really a Christian until later on. He had been going to a doctor for a long time while he was rising up through the ranks of Masonry, and the doctor was always kind of talking to him about Jesus and things like this. So the doctor, that all plays in later, but the doctor was trying to lead him on the right path, right? Get this out to your friends and family that are Masons, or that are thinking of being Masons. This book can really save some people, and I think this video could really help some people as well. It's my belief that anybody that reads this book, or for that matter even listens to this portion of the book and watches this video, if you watch this and you still think it's okay to be a Christian and a Mason, you weren't paying attention. A few things to consider would be, I mean, for one, to be inducted into the Shriners, a candidate must acknowledge that Muhammad is the true prophet, and their fez is symbolic of a, quote, great victory for Islam, when in 1465 the residents of Fez killed thousands of Jews, reportedly leaving like less than a dozen alive. So the folks riding around in Fez hats and circles in those little cars don't seem so cute anymore, do they? And highly disciplined lodges, the name of Christ is rarely, if ever, spoken, and in general the Bible, the Quran, Buddhism, and other sacred texts are all placed at equal weight. So this should also be a problem for Christians who take Scripture seriously and understand that Muhammad states in the Quran that the resurrection of Jesus didn't happen. So either Muhammad or Jesus is mistaken. Now, this book also documents really well the peer pressure that plays a role in moving a Christian to make blood and death oaths that are also clearly forbidden in the Bible. So with that being said, let's get started. Easter was approaching, and one quiet morning I was at home recuperating from the second operation when the doorbell rang. It was a special delivery letter from the Supreme Council in Washington notifying me that I had been selected for the 33rd degree. I could hardly believe it was true. This honor is one most Masons never even think of receiving. It was too much, too far out of reach, beyond limits of reality. It was unreal to think I had actually been selected. It was an honor just to be considered for this ultimate degree, and I had actually been selected, chosen by that small and powerful group, the Supreme Council of the 33rd degree. I called Bonnie to share the good news with her. In talking with her, I surprised myself by asking her if she thought I should accept it. What a strange thing to ask, I thought, but before I could contemplate it, she said, "Why, sure, why wouldn't you accept it? You've worked so hard for it, it's taken you so long to get there, by all means, you should accept it." So I returned my acceptance immediately and began making plans for the trip. Some of the world's most prominent and influential men in the world would undoubtedly be there to participate when I was given this ultimate degree. For me, little Jimmy Shaw, who had gone to work at age 5 and made it alone since age 13. They would be there to give the 33rd degree to me. It was really a bit difficult to take it all in. In order to receive the 33rd degree, it was necessary to go to Washington, D.C. The initiation and related functions were to last 3 days. Since Bonnie could participate in practically none of these things I would be doing each day, she decided not to go along. We were both excited as I made preparations to leave, but I was not as excited as I expected to be. The edge was taken off the excitement because inside me it was mixed with a considerable amount of conviction. Way down deep there was a growing restlessness, an increasing conflict, produced by the things the doctor had been sharing and by all the scripture I had been reading. Preparing to receive this ultimate honor was not as thrilling as it might otherwise have been. I flew into Washington National Airport and took a taxi to the house of the temple on Northwest 16th Street. Upon arriving at the temple, I was met by a receptionist who asked if I were there to receive the 33rd degree. I was surprised to find a woman in those sacred Masonic precincts, but said that I was and showed her my letter from the Supreme Council. She then told me that in order to receive the degree, I would be expected to make a, quote, minimum donation of a very large amount of money. At least it was a really large amount for me. So this took me completely by surprise, for there had been not a word about any such minimum donation in the letters sent me by the Supreme Council. I didn't carry that much money with me and had left my checkbook at home, but I was able to borrow some of the money from one of the other men, and I gave it to her. We candidates were all unhappy about this unpleasant surprise and grumbled to one another about it, but were not unhappy enough to forsake the degree over it. We were too close to the top of the mountain to turn back at this point. The house of the temple is quite impressive, a bit awesome really. Standing large, gray, and silent on the east side of Northwest 16th Street between R and S streets, it looms very wide and tall from the curb. There is a huge expanse of granite pavement in front of it, including 3 levels of narrowing steps as the entrance is approached. Flanking the entrance are 2 sphinx-like granite lions with women's heads, the neck of one entwined by a cobra and decorated with the ankh. Adorning the neck and breast of the other is an image of a woman, symbolic of fertility and procreation. In the pavement, just in front of the tall bronze doors, are 2 Egyptian swords with curved, serpentine blades, and between the swords, brass letters set in stone saying, "The Temple of the Supreme Council of the 33rd and last degree of the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite." Over the tall bronze doors, cut into the stone, is the statement, "Freemasonry builds its temples in the hearts of men and among nations." High above the entrance, partially concealed by stone columns, is an elaborate image of the Egyptian sun god, backed with radiating sun and flanked by 6 large golden snakes. Inside is elegance. Polished marble, exotic wood, gold, and statuary. There are offices, a library, dining room, kitchen, council room, temple room, and a large meeting room. This room is like a luxurious theater, rather elegantly furnished and decorated. The ceiling is dark blue with lights set into it and give the appearance of stars. These lights can even be made to twinkle like stars in the sky. There's a stage well equipped and it's very nicely done, but the thing that is most noticeable is the way the walls are decorated with serpents. There are all kinds of serpents, some very long, some very large, some very small. Many of the Scottish Rite degrees include the representation of serpents, and I recognized them among those decorating the walls. It was almost impressive and gave me a strange mixture of the sensations of being in a temple and in a tomb. Something sacred, but something threatening. I saw busts of outstanding men of the Rite, including 2 of Albert Pike, who were buried in the wall. The first day was devoted to registration, briefings, and interviews. We were called into one of the offices, one at a time, and interviewed by 3 members of the Supreme Council. When my turn came, I was ushered into the office and seated. The very first question I was asked was, "Of what religion are you?" Not long before this, I would have answered with something like, "I believe the ancient mysteries, the old religion, and I believe in reincarnation." However, without thinking at all about how to answer, I found myself saying, "I'm a Christian." Then, to my surprise, and theirs, I asked them, "Are you men born again?" The man in charge quickly stopped me by saying, "We're not here to talk about that. We're here to ask you questions." After they sent me back out, I sat down and thought about it. When the next man came out, I asked him, "Did they ask you if you were a Christian?" He said, "Yes, they did." "Well, what did you tell them?" I asked. And he replied, "I told them hell no, and I never intend to be." Then he said a strange thing to me. He said, "You know, they said I'm going higher." And he left through a different door, looking pleased. The second day was the day of the actual initiation, held in the theater-like meeting room. Those of us who were receiving the degree were seated, and the ceremony was exemplified, or acted out in full costume, right before us, in the same way that we had performed the lesser degrees of the Scottish Rite all those years before. The parts in the exemplification were played by men of the 33rd degree. The representative candidate was dressed in black trousers, barefooted, bareheaded, and draped in a long black robe that reminded me of a very long black raincoat. He had a black cable tow around his neck, but was not hoodwinked. During the initiation, he was led around the stage, conducted by 2 men with swords, as the degree was performed for us. Instructions and signs were given. Upon the altar were 4 holy books: the Bible, the Quran, the Book of the Law, and the Hindu scriptures. At one point, the candidate was told to kiss the book, in quotes, "of your religion," and representing us all, he leaned forward and did so. I remembered the first degree initiation when I was told to kiss the Bible, and at that moment something came full cycle. It was the final such kiss to be a part of my life. When it was time for the final obligation, we all stood and repeated the oath with the representative candidate, administered by the Sovereign Grand Inspector General. We then swore true allegiance to the Supreme Council of the 33rd degree, above all other allegiances, and swore never to recognize any other brother as being a member of the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, unless he also recognizes the supreme authority of this Supreme Council. One of the conductors then handed the candidate a human skull upside down with wine inside of it. "May this wine I now drink become a deadly poison to me, as the hemlock juice drunk by Socrates, should I ever knowingly or willfully violate the same." He then drank the wine. A skeleton, one of the brothers dressed like one, he looked very convincing, then stepped out of the shadows and threw his arms around the candidate. Then he and we continued the sealing of the obligation by saying, "And may these cold arms forever encircle me, should I ever knowingly or willfully violate the same." The Sovereign Grand Commander closed the meeting of the Supreme Council with the mystic numbers, striking with his sword 5, 3, 1, and then 2 times. After the closing prayer, we all said, "Amen, Amen, Amen," and it was over. There were some extremely prominent men there that day, including a Scandinavian king, 2 former presidents of the United States, an internationally prominent evangelist, 2 other internationally prominent clergymen, and a very high official of the federal government, the one who actually presented me with the 33rd degree certificate. Some made only brief appearances, others stayed much longer. However, they didn't do much mixing or socializing with us, except for those whom they'd already known. Even though these celebrities weren't extremely brotherly, it was still quite an experience for me just to be associated with them. It was easily the largest gathering of such prominent and influential men of which I have ever been a part of. The third day there was a banquet to celebrate our becoming Grand Inspectors General 33rd degree. The banquet was a little anticlimactic, at least for me, and I was anxious to get it over with so I could return home. It was good to be a 33rd at last. But it wasn't as exciting or fulfilling as I had thought it would be during all those years in the craft. I guess this was because of the profound changes going on deep within me. I'd returned home as soon as the 33rd degree award and related social functions were finished, for it was time for my next appointment with the doctor. After he had examined my eyes, he said they were healing fine, that he had felt good about the way they were looking, and as usual he spoke with me about the Lord. I told him that I had planned to come to his church the next Sunday and that I had been reading my Bible. Obviously pleased, he said, "Good, keep studying, and your sight will soon be much better." By this time I knew what he meant. He was speaking of my spiritual sight. In the Scottish Rite, the Thursday before Easter is called Maundy Thursday, and it's a very important day. On this day we always performed a special service of communion in the local Scottish Rite temple. At this time I was Wise Master in the chapter of Rose Craw, and it was my job to preside over the exemplification of the ceremony. I had done this many times, and was known for my knowledge of the service and for doing a good job. On Thursday evening we gathered at our home temple and dressed for the ceremony. It was always a most solemn occasion and seemed a little awesome at the same time, even to those of us who had done it so many times before. We were dressed in long, black, hooded robes. We marched in, single file, with only our faces partly showing, and we took our seats. There was something very tomb-like about the setting. The silence was broken only by an organ, playing mournfully in the background, and there was no light except for the little bit that came through the windows. After the opening prayer, from which the name of Jesus Christ was conspicuously excluded, I stood and I opened the service. As I had done so many times before, I said, "We meet this day to commemorate the death of our most wise and perfect Master, not as inspired or divine, for this is not for us to decide, but as at least the greatest of the apostles of mankind." As I spoke these words that I had spoken so many times before, I had a strange and powerful experience. It was as if I were standing apart, listening to myself as I spoke, and the words echoed deep within me, shouting their significance. They were the same words I had spoken so many times before, but had meaning for me now. They made me sick, literally ill, and I stopped. The realization of what I had just said grew within me like the rising of a crescendo. I had just called Jesus an apostle of mankind, who was neither inspired nor divine. There was a silent pause that seemed to last a very long time as I struggled with a sick, smothering within. When I was fully able, I continued with the service, and we gathered around a large table across the room in marching order. Once we were assembled at the table, I elevated the plate of bread, and I took a piece. I put my hand on the shoulder of the man in front of me, gave him the plate, and said, "Take, eat, and give to the hungry." This continued until all had partaken of the bread. Then I lifted up the goblet of wine, took a sip, and said, "Take, drink, and give to the thirsty." Again this continued until all had partaken. Then I took the bread, walked over to the first row of spectators, and served it to the man previously chosen for the honor of representing the rest of the lodge. As I handed it to him, again I said, "Take, eat, and give to the hungry." In like manner I served the wine to him, saying, "Take, drink, and give to the thirsty," and he sat down. After this we took our places at the table, shaped like a cross, and sat down. The setting was dark. Our long, sweeping robes were solid black, our faces neatly concealed in the hoods, and the mood was one of very heavy gloom. The Christless prayers and the hymns we sang fit right in. The one word that would describe the entire event to me would be black. It was indeed a black communion. It felt like a large, strange black mass. There was a large menorah in the center of the room, with 7 candles now burning. Standing again, I said, "This is indeed a sad day, for we have lost our master. We may never see him again. He is dead. Mourn, weep, and cry, for he is gone." Then I asked the officers to extinguish the candles in the large menorah. One by one they rose, they walked to the center of the room, and extinguished the candle, leaving the room right after. Finally, with only the center candle still remaining, I arose, walked sadly to the menorah, and extinguished the last candle, the candle representing the life of Jesus, our most wise and perfect Master. We had dramatized and commemorated the snuffing out of the life of Jesus, without once mentioning his name, and the scene ended with the room in deep, dark silence. I walked out of the room, leaving only the darkness and the stillness of death. Once again, the single word best to describe it would be black. All through the service I was shaking and sick. I have never felt so sad. I'd stumbled over the words, but somehow I made it to the completion of the ceremony and went back to the dressing room. I still didn't know much about praying, but felt that I had been sustained by the Lord through it all. Back in the dressing room, we hung up our black hooded robes, put our street clothes back on, and prepared to leave. Less than 2 hours had passed since I had arrived, but what had happened in that period of time had changed my life forever. Still sick in my heart, I changed clothes without a word to anyone. The others asked me what was wrong. I couldn't reply. They reminded me of that I had acted as wise masters so many times before, that I was known for my smooth performance, and they asked what had gone wrong. I was choking on the awful reality of what we had said and done, the way we had blasphemed the Lord, and the evil black mockery we had made of his pure and selfless death. With weeping welling up within me, I could only shake my head in silence and walk out. Mike was waiting for me at the door, expecting to get a ride home, and he asked, "What's the matter, Jim? Are you sick?" Finally able to speak, I quietly replied, "No, Mike. I'm just sick of this. I'm just sick of all this." I started down the wide steps in front of the large Scottish Rite temple. The realization and conviction was growing within me. I reached the bottom step and I stopped. Turning around, I looked back at the huge granite building and slowly studied the words. Carved in the stone across the top of the entrance, it said, "Ancient and Accepted Scottish Rite to Freemasonry." Something came clearly into focus in my understanding, and I made a decision. This crisis point in my life, one which had required so many years for me to reach, passed in seconds. The truth was revealed and the choice was made, a choice that would be the difference between darkness and light, death and life, one that would last for eternity. Looking up at those words I had walked under so many times, words of which I had been so proud, I spoke to myself out loud. It was as if I were the only man in the world, as I heard myself say, slowly and deliberately, "It isn't ancient, it isn't Scottish, it isn't free, and it isn't right." I turned away and I walked into the parking lot, knowing that I would never return. As I walked into the deepening darkness of that springtime night, I was walking into the growing light of the living God. As the natural darkness closed around me, the supernatural light welled up within me. With every step I took, as the temple receded behind me, I was more free. I will never return.
Not just the capital, but the geographical layout of the whole of Washington, D.C. was carefully designed, and the capital itself is just one component. Take a look at this photo and notice its relation to the Washington Monument, one of the most famous obelisks in the world. Notice how similar this is to the Vatican's layout. This exact same layout can be found in Paris also and many other cities. Why this configuration? The key to this is perhaps the dome, which dominates these buildings. In many ancient cultures, the dome shape represented the female principle or the womb. When you have the male principle, which is the obelisk, connected to the female principle, it was believed by occultists that a third entity, a kind of spiritual energy, is produced. We've already seen that idea in the square and compass logo. In occultism, the idea is also quite prevalent that certain shapes and colours either create or diffuse energies. We're quite familiar with this concept today in the form of Feng Shui, which was a craze a while ago. Arranging your furniture in relation to what they do with energies to create balance. You can think of this kind of arrangement between the obelisk and the dome as a kind of Feng Shui designed to generate a spiritual power. Now if we go inside the Capitol and look up at the dome, we see this. Now this dome looks almost exactly the same as the one in the Vatican, and at the top is a painting called the Apotheosis. It was painted by an artist called Constantino Brumidi. His story is interesting because in his younger years he became famous for his paintings commissioned by the Vatican. In 1848 there was a Masonic attempt to overthrow the power of the Pope, and although it was ultimately unsuccessful, this guy who made a living painting for the Vatican, Brumidi, was surprisingly found to be one of the guilty chief conspirators. After that he was shipped off to the USA, and there he made a name for himself by working for occult societies. It was he who painted this painting, which creates a kind of Masonic mirror image to the Vatican. The whole setup of the Capitol, dome and obelisk is present in the Masonic Washington and in the Catholic Vatican. Now this would seem odd for two seemingly opposed ideologies to do this, but then we remember Alice A. Bailey's pronouncement. There is no question, therefore, that the work to be done in familiarizing the general public with the nature of the mysteries is of paramount importance at this time. These mysteries will be restored to outer expression through the medium of the Church and the Masonic fraternity. Bailey predicted that the mystery religion would start to become familiar to the general public through both the Church, meaning the false Church, and the Masonic fraternity. This two-pronged attack appear to be on opposing sides but are working towards the same end. Remember that the founder of the Illuminated Masons, Adam Weishaupt, had actually come from the Catholic Jesuit order, but after creating the Masonic Illuminati, he claimed to be anti-Catholic. The Masons and Church appear to be opposed, but in fact are both puppets of Satan. At the top of the Capitol dome we find this statue, who symbolically faces east towards the sunrise. This is the goddess of reason who the French enthroned at Notre Dame, or as we've come to know her since the beginning of this study, Asherah or Ashtoreth. She pops up absolutely everywhere. This particular idol was designed by a Freemason, Thomas Crawford, and is standing on top of a spherical shape which almost certainly represents the earth, around which is written in Latin, E pluribus unum. This means, out of many, one. Now remember, there's always a light side and dark side to every symbol, so the lighter good meaning for public consumption is calling for the unity of the American people, which was made up of immigrants. The dark hidden meaning is that the whole world will be united under the feet of this enigmatic goddess. The American form of Asherah is mostly known as Columbia. The DC in Washington, D.C. actually stands for Washington District of Columbia, so effectively it's like saying that it's her district, her territory where she rules. Now the definition of apotheosis is the exaltation of a subject to a divine level. So who are they exalting to a divine level here? Well, if we look closer, we see that it's the same man who stands under the dome, George Washington. Look at the bottom and you will see the goddess Columbia or Asherah, and then George Washington is depicted directly above her. It represents the deification of the man, George Washington. Note the pose he is striking with his left arm raised and his right hand extended outwards. He was depicted in a similar manner when this statue was commissioned. Now this statue is again elevating Washington to a position of God, as it was modelled on Zeus. It was meant to go on display at the Capitol, but after it was found to make people uncomfortable, it was moved to the Smithsonian Museum instead. What is extraordinary is that this pose is more commonly associated with Baphomet, the horned goat god that represents Satan. Remember when we turned the pentagram representing man upside down, we got Baphomet. So if the painting intends to elevate the man Washington to the level of a god, we are forced to ask the question, what kind of god? Incidentally, while Baphomet is on the screen, you may also notice that it has both male and female features, which is the usual male and female, light and dark from one source theme that we've already seen countless times. If we go back to the painting one more time, we see that the other figures that surround Washington are also ancient gods and goddesses from pagan mythologies. The likes of Atlantis, Venus, Vulcan, Ceres and Minerva, all in reality just demons looking for worship. Directly beneath the dome is the Capitol's crypt, and on the centre of the floor there is a bronze sun symbol. This symbol is geographically the literal centre of Washington, D.C., and all street addresses are attributed in relation to it. You will actually find many pagan gods littered all around the Capitol building. This is just one final example representing Mars to be found near the entrance.
Okay, well, can we get a close-up on that area?
What is the profession?
Yeah, which profession are we talking about?
Just look at it. Is it a legal profession? Of course it's legal. It's a legal my profession. I'm trying to read it. Okay.
It's too many diamonds. Ah,
Yeah, that's too bright. That's too bright.
Well, anyway.
Oh, Mason, are you a Mason? Of course I am.
Okay.
I love DJing. I love music. What's your dream playlist?
So what do you say?
Torture me over mistakes I made over a decade ago. You're back in the game?
So let's dedicate this to General Kelly, the Border Patrol, and the ICE agents for doing such an incredible job. Right? This was written by Al Wilson a long time ago. And I thought of it having to do with our borders and people coming in. And we know what we're going to have. We're going to have problems. We have to very, very carefully vet. We have to be smart. We have to be vigilant. So here it is, the snake. It's called the snake. On her way to work one morning, down the path along the lake, a tender-hearted woman saw a poor, half-frozen snake. His pretty-colored skin had been all frosted with the dew. "Poor thing," she cried, "I'll take you in, and I'll take care of you." The border. "Take me in, O tender woman. Take me in, for heaven's sake. Take me in, O tender woman," sighed the vicious snake. She wrapped him up all cozy in a comforter of silk and laid him by her fireside with some honey and some milk. She hurried home from work that night, and as soon as she arrived, she found that pretty snake she'd taken in had been revived. "Take me in, O tender woman. Take me in, for heaven's sake. Take me in, O tender woman," sighed that vicious snake. She clutched him to her bosom. "You're so beautiful," she cried. "But if I hadn't brought you in by now, oh heavens, you would have died." She stroked his pretty skin again and kissed him and held him tight. But instead of saying thank you, that snake gave her a vicious bite. "Take me in, O tender woman. Take me in, for heaven's sake. Take me in, O tender woman," sighed the vicious snake. "I have saved you," cried the woman, "and you've bitten me, heavens, why? You know your bite is poisonous, and now I'm going to die." "Oh, shut up, silly woman," said the reptile with a grin. "You knew damn well I was a snake before you took me in." Does that explain it, folks? Does that explain it?
Yeah, they say this is the most complex machine that humanity has ever built.
And I want to, like as they said, thank everyone as we go forward. And with that, we'll say increment 42 has begun. All right?
Congrats.
All right.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. Thank you all.